My full Korean name is Kim So-gum, and I grew up in Philadelphia, or like the outskirts of Philadelphia, but was born in Dallas, Texas. And now I've been residing in Korea for the past 3.5 years. Being a Korean American in Korea is really strange because in perception, I'm seen as like a Korean Korean, and I say that to kind of differentiate between like Korean Americans and Korean Koreans, because there is like such a cultural difference, and like the upbringing in and of itself is fundamentally different. Whether you look at like the types of access to healthcare, whether it's like education, whether it's just like your family structure, and like the culture that you're brought up into, is fundamentally like a different download. My views of like America or politics or is just at odds with like Korean folks who have like grown up in Korea. My mother decided to move to Korea maybe 7 years ago, and it was during a time where I was kind of having a tough time in America, to say the least, and something just kind of like dawned on me that maybe it might be better to understand where I come from before figuring out like where exactly I'm gonna go. And so I kind of followed after my mother's footsteps to kind of understand my roots. Because I didn't really travel to Korea when I was younger. And so having grown up in America for such a long time, I wanted some change. I'm coming into Korea as like a young adult. And so I've been able to take on more responsibility and also understand myself as like not a kid anymore, and just kind of figure out society a little bit better. But it's been still kind of tough because of the language barrier. I'm not fluent in Korean. And so there's sometimes like a glass door that I bump into and I'm like, oh, this is because I don't know Korean, or like, But other than that, I've realized how gracious Korean society is and how much accessibility and privilege there is to be here. I didn't realize like how different it was to be a Korean American until like 4th grade. It was my birthday, and my mom like prepared like kimbap, and we like ordered and like catered like a whole set of kimbap for the class, and they brought it, and kids that were just like, ew, what is that? And it was like kind of like a moment of like, oh, there is a difference in like culture, that I like kind of like was like, oh, this is so strange. At the moment I was like, I love kimbap, and then in that split second I was like, I hate this. And I guess that was the moment that I realized like, oh, there is a difference in how people live. I kind of wanted to embrace differences, and I think that the differences really challenge us and try to have us like really reckon with like what we really believe. I don't want to always just kind of follow mainstream culture. I think dance, poetry, photography, these things have like become a place where I can really show my creative side. I used to break dance because of like these like two like b-boys, and they're like cool, so I was just like, oh, I should just hang out with them and just learn how to dance. It's weird, like dance was the reason why I decided to go to church. I'm a very like busybody, and so I think that dance has been like a way of an outlet for me. B-boying or breaking, I learned like there's so many different varieties of dance, and I learned house, and just kind of realized that I resonate more with like house music and house dance, and giving homage to like the culture that I started in, whether that's like in Chicago or whether it's through like the people in Philadelphia. Like I've gotten to know a different type of culture because of it. Yeah, I worked in the F&B industry. I was taking a bunch of odd jobs, and still trying to find my niche. I moved out to Chicago at one point to be a barista, and then I came back to Korea and have been trying to figure out my like path since then. I thought about like becoming a teacher actually. I really am blessed to have like really incredible mentors, and they've influenced me to want to pass this kind of like knowledge along, or whatever wisdom that I might have accrued in this lifetime. The impact that like adults have on like children really resonated with me because I've had such good mentors. And because of that, I think I've wanted to become someone who can be a mentor for someone else. I have a mentor named Warren, and he's been with me since I was like in second grade. And he's just kind of watched me grow up in a way that, yeah, just has been walking with me since the beginning, from what I can remember, you know. And to see someone so dedicated in my life has been really meaningful. And it has me realize like I'm not alone, and it has me realizing that like I have to do better for others, you know, just because there's been so much grace and care that's been like put into me. Out of some of the odd jobs that I've done, I also was a project coordinator for the Korean American Association of Greater Philadelphia. And what I was doing there was kind of helping organize meetings and kind of doing the background work to get a statue implemented into the fabric of the city. The Statue of Peace is in honor and remembrance of the comfort women. It's a euphemism, but essentially the women who were taken by like the Japanese Imperial Army during World War II. It's going to be located in 800 South Front Street, Philadelphia, and it's in proximity to like Independence Hall and also in accordance to like the Korean War Memorial. And so this plaza is going to be like the first in the world that's kind of dedicated to these women. And I think that like it symbolizes a lot of like historical memory and also just kind of a signifier of like this fight for justice that continues even to this day. I think that the fight for women's rights is ongoing, and I think that even during this time, there's still so much work to be done. And I think that some strength that we can pull from is actually from these grandmothers and their fight for justice, even up to their like age, but then also how we're called to remember like complicated like narratives and to kind of still draw strength from the good fight, I guess. I'm learning that substantial like growth takes time, and that it's not in like a split second you are now like fully grown. It's through the steps in the process, and how much patience my team Jung has been really incredible, actually. This project has been going on for 7 years, and we're at the precipice, and there's still so much work to be done. And sometimes I think that within like nonprofit organizations, burnout can be really real, and I think that we're still figuring out how to balance the good work and also keeping ourselves in a place where we can do it and to achieve it. I have a poem that I've kind of used to kind of comprise my thoughts on like this topic. I've kind of like taken away a lot of like negative thoughts on like how society views women, but I think that because of that kind of like pushback, it's given me a lot more strength to push forward, to carve out my own space. And so I think in that complicated like moment, you're challenged and also pushed to make room for your own self. Yeah, do you mind if I share that poem with you?
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. We mustn't forget who we fight for. Our families, our loved ones, and the children we swear to protect. But while men were out fighting, the comfort of women was falsely assumed. Blue moon faces red, and the Japanese Imperial Army continues to expand. Haunting shadows of our land deepen, and while we were all sleeping, girls vanish. Families wake up to decisions of rations over missing children, and our stomach churns. Strong arm you while comfort stations points guns and hangs rice in the weight of children over your head. The rationale is that our stomachs can hold another one once we've become stable. Choose food for your present family because we all have to eat. Some may call this inhumane, and I will call this survival. War has not faced you and I as it has the generations before us, but we know consequences far too well. You cannot help someone else unless you are able to help yourself. if not the Japanese Imperial Army. America's military occupies space in South Korea, even to this day. Do not get cut off for standing too close to the edge. Stay close to one another in hopes to not be the next. Children are taken without representation, and so the question is, who do I turn to in their absence? I, both Korean and American, stand in the inheritance of war, in the aftermath of destruction. Realize workers, civilians, laborers, comfort women. Korean women have no honor in war. Only sacrifices and fallen stories, double edges cut through hair, sweeping all of the weeds, and instructions were given. Orders will follow. Kill all the men, collect the children, and leave no woman behind. I would really like to engage with like the Korean American communities, whether that's in like the West Coast, the East Coast, the diaspora, to really support this cause for the Statue of Peace in Philadelphia. I think that more than it being a symbol, I think that having a place to really mark history is important for not only Korean Americans, but also just for Koreans in general. My name is Sogum Grace Kim, and this is my Korean American story.